Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Rapozo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Rapozo. Today my guest is Donald Egle, Ph.D. He's the founder and managing director of the Kyer Group and former marketing and communications leader at institutions such as LeTourneau University, James Madison University, and Liberty University. And today's topic is on leading with joy during higher ed's tough seasons. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Big shout out to Bart Kyer for introducing us, first of all.
That's right.
So it's a good connector, so I really appreciate him. And
he sure is.
And all the work he does with the Higher Ed Marketer podcast, so he's been a big inspiration for me. So blessings to him, and we're jumping right into this conversations today, which is about his doctoral dissertation. So Don, 3 years ago you completed your dissertation, Joyful Leadership Amidst Tragedy and Triumph. What first drew you to that study, and why did you feel it was important enough to dedicate a doctoral dissertation to it?
Yeah, well, Chris, there was a couple things about the topic of joyful leadership that was important for me. First of all, is the significance and transformational impact of joyful leadership, joy being foundational to leadership. Number two is if you just look at the world around us, the organizations that we engage with, the teams that we're a part of, joy oftentimes is in short supply. Mm-hmm. And so what would it look like for us to lean into this idea of leading joyfully, living joyfully in a very authentic way? Mm-hmm. I think the other part that was really important is that this idea of joy is an important choice that we all make. Mm-hmm. And so those were some important influencing factors for me. But specifically, I'd like to just take us back for a moment to March of 2020. It was about probably a week and a half before the world completely shut down due to COVID. But I was actually in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, at a conference. And in fact, it was Patrick Lencioni's conference. He's only done a couple of them. And of course, Lencioni is the author of The Advantage, Why Organizational Health Trumps Organizational Intelligence. He's written The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Motive, The 6 Types of Working Genius, and so really established author. But I was at the conference, and I've always enjoyed his writings, but specifically at this conference, it had people really from all over the world. And the keynote address was from a gentleman by the name of Alan Mulally. And some may be familiar with that name. Mulally was a former executive at Boeing, but then was named the CEO of Ford Motor Company in the mid-2000s. And of course, the automotive industry had really had some ups and downs at that time. But for context, in the mid-2000s, Ford Motor Company was hemorrhaging about $18 billion in cash. That's that billion with a B. And then, of course, in 2008, you had the financial markets crash, and it impacted the automotive industries. And so some may remember in 2008, the 3 big domestic auto makers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler at the time, their CEOs were part of a congressional hearing and providing testimony, and that's when the government had provided money for the 3 companies to kind of help them financially get through it. Mm-hmm. Ford Motor Company was the only one that did not accept government money. Okay. Mulally was the CEO at that time, and he's really credited with one of the greatest kind of industrial corporate turnarounds of the last century. And so as a backdrop, I had been following his kind of leadership for some time. The other part is because he had gone to Ford Motor Company, my grandfather was an executive with Ford Motor Company for decades and had retired a while back. And so I had been following the company as well. Well, he was the keynote at this conference. And so as I'm in the audience at this conference, Chris, Patrick Lencioni is kind of emceeing the conference, and he begins to introduce Alan. He provides the introduction, people applaud, and you expect someone to come from the green room or come up the stairs or back behind the curtains, right? Nobody came out. And all of a sudden, everyone's attention started to turn toward the back of the room. Well, Mullally was sitting in the back next to the sound technicians and walked through the crowd to the stage. Come to find out later, he does this often, from what I learned, because he wants to take time to thank the people that are making events like that possible. And so it was just a very unique introduction. The two gentlemen stand on stage and they begin to tell this story. So all of us in attendance, we got to hear this story. And about the first time they met in person. And it was at a conference years prior in Iowa. They were backstage, and according to how they told the story, they were backstage talking. Lencioni had written the book, The Advantage, Why Organizational Health Trumps Organizational Intelligence. And Mullally said, I love your new book. It's an incredible book. I've read it. It's made such a difference. There's only one thing in that book you got really wrong. And about that time, Chris, Mullally had to go to the stage and speak. And he left Lencioni hanging in the back. So as Patrick is describing this story at the conference for us, he said, I was left hanging backstage. This massive, transformative corporate CEO just told me that the book I released had one major mistake in it. But I didn't know what it was. Mullally finishes his speech. He comes back at this Iowa conference and says, I tell you what, I've got to fly back to Detroit, Michigan. How about you and your colleague hop on the jet, fly back, we'll talk about the book, and then the jet will fly you back to California.
Wow.
So as they're recounting the story, he said, Lencioni said, we are sitting in the jet across from one another, and Mullally pulls out the book from his briefcase, and it's completely marked up. He consumed the book. But he said on page, whatever it was, 167 or whatever the page number was, he said, you state here that leadership is a sacrifice. And he said, I disagree with that. He said, I believe leadership is a privilege and a joy. We get to do this. We get to lead. And Chris, it was in that moment in March of 2020, as I'm sitting in this large event space in Dallas-Fort Worth, where I started to ask myself the question, here's a corporate CEO talking about leadership being a joy and a privilege at a season where Ford Motor Company was hemorrhaging $18 billion of cash in the midst of a financial market crash. And yet he still saw leadership as a joy and sacrifice. And so I began a journey of both reflection and then great intentionality to say, do I lead joyfully? Do I lead joyfully but inconsistently? If I were to do it consistently, what would the attributes be to do that well? And so that was the introduction to this topic. And so then when I went to do my actual research, I looked at what research existed. There wasn't a lot on joyful leadership. And I really felt like there was an important gap in the research and an important gap in how we apply leadership within our organizations and teams that could have great benefit. And I thought, what would it look like to help more people understand what does it look like to lead joyfully with boldness, courage, authenticity, and to really make a positive difference for others.
Absolutely. There's a good shift there in mindset, just if you think about that, right? Instead of it feeling like a burden, then turning it around and seeing it as a privilege. Do you see a correlation between joyful leadership and servant leadership?
Yeah, and so of course, servant leadership, as we know, it focuses, the primary premise of it is we place the needs of other people before our own, right? We put people before ourselves. We put the mission before ourselves. Yeah. And I do think that it does show up. I think that, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about this in this conversation, but I think it speaks to the motivation for why people choose to lead.
Right.
And I think that if leaders have the wrong motivation, if it's for if they're selfish or if it's for self-gain, their approach to leadership is about all of the wrong things.
Right.
And I think when you do that, it's very hard to be authentically joyful, and it's very hard to serve others well and to serve the mission of your organization well, if the only reason why you're leading is what you get out of it. And I think back to Malali's address in 2020, he spent an enormous amount of time talking about it is not about what you as a leader get out of this. It's about what you give and how you invest and how you inspire others to pursue things that are truly transformational. So I do think that there's a significant connection.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Malani and Patrick Linciani, both high-level executives, but it's important for the listeners as well to realize that leadership doesn't mean that you have to have a title to have people underneath you, right? You lead by example. You lead by the people within your sphere. So even if you have a coworker who may look at things a little bit differently than you do, in a negative view, you may be able to switch their mindset if they're feeling stressful about their jobs or really not wanting to show up the way they're supposed to show up. If you can lead by example and can talk to them and then change that mindset to see the joy and the privilege in the position that they have. I've had that a lot when I worked in the legal industry a couple of years ago, that there were major layoffs, and I had this shift in my mind as well, where I saw all these people that I used to work with out of a job, looking for a job, but weeks before complaining about that job. And I thought to myself, I have that job still, and I'm so grateful to have that job. And I will never complain about this job again, because I've seen 20, 30 coworkers get laid off, and they're now scrambling. So, it's not always green on the other side, and you could always have it worse than you have it now. That's always something I would encourage people to think about as well.
That's exactly right.
So we're both Christians. We know the difference between joy and happiness, but in your dissertation, you distinguish the joy from happiness. How would you explain that distinctions to a leader who's never really thought about that difference?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. You're right, Chris. It's such an important distinction. Here's how I would describe it. Joy is a way of being. It's a way of living. It's a way of behaving. It's a way of leading. It's a way of working and learning, regardless of the circumstances around you. Happiness, on the other hand, is a feeling or an emotional response to the circumstances that are around you that inform how you act, think, behave, lead. And for some listening or watching this, they may say, okay, Don, that sounds like a very subtle or nuanced difference, but the research supports the difference, but I also think we've all seen that play out in very practical ways in organizations. Because happiness oftentimes is being driven by the circumstances, our circumstances in life, they are constantly in flux, right? Life and leading is hard work. It's good work, but it's hard work. And there are things that happen that sometimes are self-inflicted. There are other things that happen to people and to companies and organizations. The idea is not whether the hard things are going to happen. It's what is our response to that. And when you live and lead joyfully, you have come to a place in life where you see joyful leadership as a philosophy and a way of being, not just a reaction to what's happening around you. And I think that is a fundamental difference. And I think that we've seen it, right, in organizations where leaders, it's like a roller coaster. You're not sure which type of leader you're going to get.
Yeah, that's
and
tough.
It is. And so certain things are, riding high, and so you get a certain kind of leader. And then on other times when things are hard,
Right.
you get a different kind of leader. And for those that are teams, they count on consistency and continuity, and I think that matters. And I think this is why, again, the topic of joyful leadership was so important, and the distinction between joy and happiness really mattered.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Quick break to tell you about my new book that I co-authored with Rob Clark called The Attention Gap: Why Great Schools Stay Invisible and How to Fix It. We wrote it for higher ed marketers, enrollment leaders, and anyone trying to reach students in today's noisy, scroll-happy world. It's built from 130 plus episodes and conversations with higher ed leaders from this show, plus Rob's experience growing that tall family to over 4 billion views online. You unpack why the old marketing playbook isn't working any longer and what you can do about it instead to fix that. If your team is serious about closing the gap between great programs and real visibility online, this book is for you. Grab your copy of The Attention Gap today on Amazon. And now, back to the episode.
The distinction you made with joy is not a feeling, right? Happiness is a feeling. It's the same with,
right.
I always think about that when it comes to love. It's sometimes hard work to love somebody, but when you make that commitment towards that person, it doesn't matter how you feel sometimes about it. It's knowing what you have and what you committed to, and be joyful about that. And in the pre-interview, I shared with you that my dog recently passed away, and I was not happy about this. But I was joyful about the time that we had together, right? So, of course, I was distraught the first couple of days, but then put it into perspective, just thinking about the last 12 years that I was able to have with him, we're so filled of joy that this is what I will remember in the end with him. So
Yeah. And Chris, I was so sorry to hear about that loss. Those things are so hard.
Oh, yeah.
They're hard to navigate.
Very hard, very hard. But yeah, this is part of life, and better to love and loss, but and to never love at all.
Yeah. Yes.
So one of the key findings is in your dissertation was the mindset of a leader. What does that mindset look like in practice, especially when the pressure is high and the outcomes are uncertain? You just mentioned that sometimes you have these ebbs and flows with certain leaders, that the employees don't really know who they're going to get on any certain day.
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things, not just in my research, but the practical application of it, is that joy is a choice, and that choice will be tested. Mm-hmm. So I think as we think about mindset, not as just leaders, but then also colleagues that we work with, as we collaborate with colleagues, as we build teams, and as we advance the mission of organizations, we all have a very important choice to make. And that choosing joy is very important, but you have to choose. And when you choose, it's only a matter of time before that choice is tested. We've all experienced the things personally and professionally, and you have to be very clear on what you're about, and you need to do it before you get into all of those different, life and professional challenges. Mm-hmm. Because if you wait to be in that moment, there's a good chance you make the wrong decision.
Right. And
so that would be one. I think number two is joy is contagious. Mm. Joy, true, authentic joy is contagious. People understand. They sense what's happening. They begin to buy in, but it requires the leader, I believe, to be very consistent and authentic in that joy. They also, people that are on teams, they need to know that their leader's going to show up the same joyful way, mm-hmm. regardless of the circumstances. Mm-hmm. When things are good, when things are bad, when life offers up tragedy and triumph, are you as a leader going to show up the same way? Yeah. And that's contagious. When you do that well, people rally around that. And I think it's just it's a topic that we don't talk enough about, I think, within nonprofits and businesses and education and organizations and on university campuses. Oftentimes, especially with the challenges facing higher education, for example, these days, the circumstances that will sway leadership and decision-making are abundant. The question is not about a reaction as much as it's going to be a mindset of we get to do this. It's a privilege and a joy to be here, to be able to do something about those challenges. We hear often in higher ed, and Chris, you and I have seen this many, many times, everybody wants to pick the topic, right? Let's just take the enrollment cliff. Mm-hmm. Well, no one on a campus is happy about the enrollment cliff.
Right.
There's nothing about an enrollment cliff that's going to provide happy.
Yeah.
But you can find great joy because if the mindset is we get to be part of this, we get to help our institution make the right decisions to create the necessary conditions to win.
Right.
And I what I love about true, authentic, joyful leadership is it changes the mindset to where you as the leader and the people that you work with, that you get to inspire, they see it beyond just the challenge. They understand that it's a mindset. We get the opportunity to do something about it. We get the opportunity to work today to be a little bit better than we were the day before. And what I have found is that mindset really changes the dynamic. It changes the conversation. I mean, how often do you walk into a meeting and someone says they don't have an attitude of we get to do this and we're going to get a little bit better today, but they want the results that's going to fix all their problems.
Yeah.
They want the results, but they're not willing or they're not capable of creating the conditions to win. Mm-hmm. That's a problem because it doesn't get the institutions out of anything except the churning that's happening on campuses. Mm. That's why I believe back to the philosophy of joyful leadership. Not only is it a philosophy of leadership, I think it has significant practical application to decision making, to culture even. I think it shapes how a university or a college or a business approaches the marketplace. And I think it's a competitive advantage.
Right. Absolutely. I always think where there's turmoil, there's opportunity in the marketplace, right? So if the traditional age students are dwindling, what are the opportunities that we can see in that storm, whether it's adult learners, first-generation students, typically underserved demographics that we haven't tapped into yet. Maybe those are the ones that are ripe for the picking for us going forward. Right. If there's a certain demographic that's no longer working for us or not as abundantly as it used to. Now, you also mentioned earlier somebody wants to switch their mindset into joyful leadership. As with everything, you have to have practice, and there's the ups and downs and ebbs and flows of it and the occasional mistakes that you make as you grow as a professional. How important is to surround yourselves with leaders like yourself that have been through it and that know how to get to the next level of that professional development? And how do you find these people?
Yeah. Well, I've had the amazing opportunity at working at, 3 different nationally recognized universities in over almost a 26-year time span. And I now get the opportunity to work with more leaders and more organizations to help them create the conditions to win, but specifically helping them solve the gaps between vision, strategy, execution, and culture. What I find is that a lot of these things, there's a lot of gaps that are happening in how universities and colleges, for example, operate, but it's not industry specific. So what I find is that the topic of joyful leadership and working with leaders on campuses, one is it's a way to encourage you're not alone. You cannot achieve what needs to be achieved on a campus by yourself. It requires a team of dynamic and gifted colleagues. It also requires you to be aligned with an institution that is committed to shaping and building the conditions necessary to win. And so if you take a look, for example, at enrollment and marketing professionals within higher ed, so often they're kind of on the receiving end of a lot of demands, at times a lot of criticism, when in fact it's actually not about one person or one team. It takes an entire university to make a decision. How are we going to create the conditions to win, and how are we going to align our unique value proposition to the needs of the market. And as a background in marketing and sales, one of the things I see often is universities and colleges are not taking enough time to listen to what the market actually needs.
Yep.
And they end up in this kind of echo chamber, and it's a real problem. So for me, joyful leadership gives us insight into how to encourage one another and encourage colleagues, especially those on the front lines. Real quick as an example of that. On the enrollment side, if you were to ask most individuals on a college campus if they've taken any opportunity to go onto the front lines in the market to hear directly from students and families what's important to them, most would say that they have not taken that opportunity. Yet, they have very strong positions on what the university needs to do to win. And there is a complete disconnect there. And so, to your question, one of the things I think is very important is that when we lead joyfully and we understand what goes into creating the conditions to win, it allows us to reframe the narrative. It allows us to reshape the context in which we're in. Sitting around and everybody talking about the enrollment cliff does not change anything.
Right.
Chris, I don't know about you. I've yet to find someone that's going to be able to change the enrollment cliff.
Right, it's coming. It's here. It's here. You just got to deal with it.
It is, and so oftentimes you hear individuals will say, the headwinds are coming or the headwinds are here. Well, the best way I believe to deal with the headwinds is to hit the gas and fly straight through the headwinds. It's when organizations start to drift or they pause or they slow down or they're indecisive that they end up on these massive detours. And so it allows us to shape and reframe the context. The other thing is joyful leadership allows us to provide foundational consistency so organizations and those that are on the teams following understand that you as a leader, they know how you're going to show up. And it gives them more freedom to know how they can show up.
Yeah.
And it's a great developmental opportunity. The other thing I love about it, Chris, is it allows individuals to clarify their preferred future. What type of institution, what type of team, what type of professional do I or do we want to become?
That's right.
And that is such a freeing, incredible moment because it allows us to think about what would have to be true for us to seize that opportunity. What would have to be true to solve that problem? What conditions would have to exist to win? And what I have found is that not only joy is contagious, but the momentum it creates, it compounds. And so I would just say progress compounds. And when we focus on, let's get a little bit better each day, focus on the conditions that drive the results, that momentum and progress compounds, and people really can rally around that.
It does make a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned earlier that some of these higher level executives on higher education institutions, they don't go outside, talk to the target audience, to their students, to get first-party data. Why do you think that is?
It's a great question. I think, and this would be, I think, somewhat of an obvious observation that I'm making. I think it's very different on different institutions. Some of it's just size and scale and scope. Yep. Some institutions are so large that it may not be on the radar.
Yeah.
There are others that probably think that they don't need to. There are others that think they understand.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think that's one of the more dangerous ones.
It is. You got to keep learning, constantly evolving, right? And you got to go out there. I mean, that's what I love going to conferences myself and working the conferences because I have the target audience right in front of me and I can ask them what their pain points are, what they're struggling with, what's working, and what their preferred future looks like, right? I'm there. And this is when I get the content, is when I get to help them with helpful resources, right? I mean, obviously, I'm going there as an employee of a vendor, and I'm trying to sell our services and put us in the best light. But if they don't have the budget for it, at least I have some collateral that I can give them to help them along the journey while they're trying to better themselves in their institution. So being there, hearing from the people that I'm trying to serve, I think that's always the best. And I hear other marketers that I've talked to on this podcast, they go downstairs during lunchtime, go to the cafeteria, and sit down with some students, right? And just get a little bit of information. And you get a sample size of 20 students or so to do a month-long engagement every day throughout the month of August or September, and just sit down with them at the commons area and just pick their brain for 10 minutes, maybe even bring some food or buy some donuts if you want to make it official. But they're there and they want to share their stories and what's working and what's not working. So harvest is plentiful, workers are few.
Yeah. Well, and Chris, you bring up a great point. It's important as leaders in any organizational context, but specifically higher education, if you don't listen to the students and families and prospective students and families, you miss the opportunity to understand how to provide the most incredible, dynamic, transformative experience for them. Yep. And what's interesting is there's a little bit of a disconnect on college campuses, because I don't think you'd find much disagreement on college campuses with faculty and leadership and others, boards, about the impact and the mission of what we're doing to educate the next generation, or to educate the working adult to make a better career in life for themselves. Nobody's disagreeing in concept with those things. Right. However, when you don't listen to those that you're serving, you unintentionally miss an incredible opportunity to enrich them and enrich their life. Yep. And if you don't talk to them, you're not able to clarify what problem you're helping them solve. Mm-hmm. Yep. And you and I both know it matters. If you are not helping a customer or a prospective student or their family solve very real problems that are on their minds, they will choose someone else.
Someone will answer those questions.
That's exactly right. And I think that this idea, there's a great brief story that I absolutely love, and it was recently from the president at High Point University, Dr. Nito Cabine, and he was talking about appreciative value, and I absolutely love it because I think it highlights one of the problems we're seeing on college campuses. He in essence, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he just says, just because you offer value doesn't mean that the person that you're offering value to appreciates it. Mm-hmm. If they don't appreciate it, it doesn't make what you offered less valuable. They just don't care. Mm-hmm. And so he used a couple of examples. He just says, and he in early part of his career, he used to know, I believe, the CEO of Pepsi. And he said, if my friend at Pepsi offered me a semi-truckload of Pepsi products, but I could not give it to anyone, I couldn't give it away, I couldn't sell it, it was just for me. He said, would you all agree that that's tremendous value? And the audience said, well, of course, that's significant value. He said, I would agree. Here's the problem. Since it's only for me and I can't sell it and I can't give it away, he said, I don't like Pepsi products. And he said, so yes, I can acknowledge that it's valuable, but it's not something I appreciate. Sure. He said, let me give you another example. If I were to give you a all expense paid 2-week trip to Hawaii, we're going to fly you out to Hawaii, you're going to do 2 weeks on a cruise ship, and you're going to go to all the different islands. Don't have to pay for a thing. You can't sell it, you can't give it away. Would you agree that there's great value in that? And most people, I think, acknowledge there's great value. He said, but if you don't like to fly and you get seasick, he said, do you find the level of appreciation in that? Right. Probably not. Yeah. And I think that I love that story, he says, because I think it has such application to how we work with colleagues on campuses. Mm-hmm. What they're offering and what they think of themselves oftentimes, in most cases, does have value. They do have a value proposition, but if you don't listen to the audience, you don't understand how to connect the value in ways that they're going to appreciate. Yeah. And so I think that's part of why campuses are going, wait a minute, we're doing these amazing things. Why is it not resonating? It's not resonating because the great things you're doing is not helping the customer, in this case, solve a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if I only love it, right, and it's just for me, it's just, and the target audience doesn't like it, it doesn't matter, how good the product is. I recently had a book club meeting on Jay Baer's book Utility, and in that book he talks about Taxi Mike. Taxi Mike is a taxi driver, I think, out of Milwaukee, and in his car he has a big printout, a full page of all the top-rated restaurants within Milwaukee. And in the book he says, Jay Baer says, Taxi Mike's printout is gold in Milwaukee, but over in Madison, it's recycling because nobody needs it over there, right? So it depends on where you're at, who you're talking to. One thing is one piece of content may be gold for one person, but for the other one, it's completely irrelevant.
And Chris, real quick, I love that point you make, and it's so important because that's hard for campuses to understand oftentimes. Well, why doesn't everyone appreciate at the same level what we're doing? Right. And so the solution is we need to go find just more people to know more about us, and when they know how great we are, they're going to buy. And that is not true. Yeah. We don't need the world to know about our institutions. We need our institutions to have the right people know about them. That's right. And that's such an important distinction. And I think there's a very important part, us as leaders, to help campuses and campus leaders understand that those are the pressure points and compression points happening for our enrollment and marketing leaders, especially on college campuses. They're on the front lines. They're in the field. They're in the market. Yeah. They understand this. And if there's not alignment within the organization, it becomes significant barriers to creating the conditions to win that we talked about. And so that's one of the reasons why I've just been so optimistic about, being able to work with more leaders and organizations and help them through that part of the journey.
That's a good episode. I could go on and on all day with this, but we're going to have to land a plane. So I got another question for you. You identify growth, relationship, success, and fellowship with God as a central theme in joyful leadership. Which one of these has had the greatest impact on your own leadership journey, and why?
Yes. So I love that question, Chris. Thank you. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm a believer and follower of Jesus. The research I did had a Christian foundational pillar to that research. And so that obviously is the most important for me in my life. It's a groundedness and a depth to how I live and lead. Yeah. What I would say, though, secondly, and this came out in the research, and I hope that your listeners and your viewers understand that for me, that my Christian faith offers significant depth to living and leading with joy, but that if for whatever reason a person in their life's not there at that place, there is still an opportunity to work, live, and lead with joy. It's just that my Christian faith adds depth to that experience, and I saw that in the research. If you look at the end of my research, there were 5 major kind of takeaways, and that those first 4 are somewhat sequential, and they build on one another. And then I get to the 5th part, which is my Christian faith. And what I'm finding is that wherever you are in life and wherever you are in your leadership, you can find great authentic joy in your work, in how you learn from your experiences, how you grow and develop, how you invest in yourself as a leader, how you shift your mindset, how you focus on serving other people, stay focused on the organizational mission. And then how do you create the conditions to drive winning results? Those things are possible. I just add that 5th dimension in my life with the depth of my Christian faith. And I think that really is important for people to know that regardless of where you are in life and in your career and in leadership, leading and living joyfully is available. It's just a choice you have to make, and understand that choice will be tested. But my goodness, can you imagine a day, imagine a world, imagine an organization and a culture, Chris, where people wake up each day consistently focused on living and leading joyfully and making a transformative impact for those they serve and for the missions that they're advancing? Wow. Imagine if we could get closer to that.
Yeah, we'd be a lot more united and better off for sure.
We sure would.
If you could leave a higher ed leader with one idea from your research that you hope stays with them long after this conversation, what would that be?
Consider yourself blessed. Consider yourself blessed to have the opportunity, whatever your context is, whatever organization you're in, whatever the alignment or misalignment is, wherever your team is. My word would be, please see and view yourself as blessed. You get the opportunity to lead and lead well. You get the opportunity to lead joyfully, and you get the opportunity to not just positively impact others, but you get the opportunity to bring others along with you and together accomplish things that weren't possible otherwise. Mm-hmm. I hope that leaders are encouraged, even in light of the great challenges that higher education is facing, and there's a lot of them. The list is long, but it's okay, because each of you listening are in an opportunity and in a seat and in a position where you can contribute to the solution. You can do something about it, and you can bring a lot of people with you. Not everybody gets that opportunity, and that's my encouragement. It might not be great, and there's hard days, and it's hard work. Your joyful choice is going to be tested, but my goodness, if we get it right, and we can bring others with us, we will navigate the storm with great skill, and we will weather the conditions, whether we have control over them or not. We're going to lead well, and we give our organizations a better chance to win. Can't guarantee the results, right? But we can sure contribute to giving them the best chance possible. And so that would be my encouraging word.
Amen. Amen to that. Don, tell us a little bit about the Kyer group and how people can connect with you after this.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So I've had the opportunity. I started the Kyer group in 2002, and so I've had an opportunity throughout my career to work with leaders and organizations. And so I'm actually really excited because I'm actually expanding that with more opportunity to work with more leaders and more organizations at the Kyer group. Our focus is on helping leaders create the conditions to win and solve the gaps between vision, strategy, execution, and culture, and to do that in a very joyful way. And so I'd love for people to visit and learn a little bit more about our work. It's www.thekyergroup.com. My email address is donald@thekyergroup.com. And on the website, we even have some free resources that people can look at. We do a gap assessment, so leaders can kind of get a sense of where the gaps might be in their operation. We offer some joyful leadership resources. What does it mean to lead well and lead with joy? And of course, those are available on the website, but would have loved to connect with folks that are listening where they're like, you know what? I don't have to do this alone, and would love a peer level partner to kind of come and walk side by side through some of the unique challenges and pursue great opportunity and pursue a better and more preferred future. So, Chris, I love what you're doing with the podcast. Thank you so much for the chance to be able to connect with you. Love what you're doing.
Of course, thank you so much for being here. I'll be sure to tag you after this episode on LinkedIn, the Kyer Group, Kyer. Also have our URL in the show notes. So everybody go visit the page, connect with Don. Don, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be with you.
And that's a wrap for this episode, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Education Marketing Leader Podcast this week. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with your friends and your network. And if you ever thought about starting your own podcast, now that you listen to one and you got inspired, reach out to me via DM. We'd love to help you launch your own. We'll take care of everything for you, the scripting, the strategy, the editing, the distribution. All you have to do is show up, connect with your audience, and build your personal brand. So if you're ready for it, let's chat. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time at the Education Marketing Leader Podcast. Take care, friends.